So, Jerry, tell us about the man behind the cue, right? Give us a backstory about where you come from and a little bit about your childhood before you got into pool.
No.
Okay, cool. Now, honestly, the reason I'm asking you that was because a certain really good friend of yours
Hmm.
that just happens to be in Alaska made mention that he felt like, looking back on it, everything in his life led up to making pool cues. So, would you be able to relate to that?
No.
No, not at all.
No. I Thomas Wayne, isn't he? He's a peach. One of my
Yeah,
best friends in life.
absolutely.
I love him to death. Well, you're asking about my. I grew up in La Crescenta, California,
Okay, so
which is a kind of it was a suburb of the LA area.
okay,
And that was the '70s. I was born in '64. So by '74, I was 10 years old and riding skateboards and running around the neighborhood and doing all that fun stuff. I never was a sports guy. I never really didn't play any kind of sports. I was a skateboard, motorcycle, uh, bicycle guy. That was what my thing was. So, I mean, I was always just kind of an oddball kid, I think. But failed every class I could, going through junior high, high school, all that. Always,
typical Stefan, right?
but yeah, always had fun doing everything else, and had a lot of passion about things, but school was never my vibe. It's funny as I remember my mom telling me, because I didn't do good in school, and so kids make fun of me for being stupid or whatever, and she said, Jerry, you just have to remember, you very well might be the smartest one in the class, including the teacher. Just because you're not getting good grades on things, just because you're not a good reader, doesn't mean you're not smart.
That's good encouragement.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so, I was kind of allowed to do what I wanted to do, and of course it was a different time then, so there's a lot more freedom in that.
Was there a way that you expressed your artistic ability? Because obviously now that you're an artist and a master craftsman, when you look back at your childhood, was there an expression of your artistic
Yeah,
ability?
that's a good question. I drew and I was interested in drawing and those kind of things, but I made things. I was in my dad was construction business, so there was always, tools and kind of machines and things around the house. And I always made things. I always kind of made things out of wood and was carving things, and of course made slingshots. And I made a crossbow one time when I was probably 11 years old or something that was really good, worked really good, scared all the neighbor mothers, what is he doing? He's got this thing, they freaked
What
out.
about the math part? And the reason is, and it kind of keys into what you mentioned about your dad, and I'd heard that your dad was in construction, that you worked with your dad. What I'm noticing is a key common denominator among great cue makers. They all come from some type of a background, whether it's in cabinetry or woodworking. I shouldn't say all, but the ones that I've had the privilege of talking to, cabinetry making, some type of tools. Of course, we've had the conversations where a lot of the master cue makers are machinists, which you're not a machinist, but coincidentally,
I am now.
yeah, your points though, and the silver lines, which we can talk about later, but they're known as some of the best of the best of the best. So you've developed into a machinist. But back to the childhood stuff, when you were working with your dad, what type of construction were you guys doing?
Well, my dad was a general contractor, but mostly he did concrete work, some masonry work, structural concrete, excavation, that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. Heavier construction. But I grew up working, and it wasn't like I think that generation was more like that too. I mean, I worked. By the time I was 8 or 9 years old, my dad would come home with a truck with a pallet of bricks on it or something, and
Yeah.
tell me and my sister to go out there and unload it, and stack them all up over here, and don't chip any of them, and make sure you kind of interlace them this way, and we just worked.
What was he like, your dad?
Actually, he's 91. He lives with
91 years
yeah.
old.
He lives
Wow.
with us. Me and Jan we have a guest house at our house in Ventura, and he's got a little guest residence in the back there.
So
and
cool.
Yeah, he lives
So
with
cool.
us. So he was kind of the life of the party guy, and construction worker, gone a lot. Of course, gone early in the morning and came back later at night, and just
One thing that you
that.
mentioned a moment ago, though, about your mom always telling you that you were smart, and telling you that you were smarter basically than what the circumstances looked like. I think that's a real key thing. I believe that the power of death and life and death are in the tongue, and the thing is, we believe the things that we speak about ourselves, or oftentimes what people speak of us. So you look at yourself now, all the awards, all the accolades, all the stuff you've accomplished, a lot of that had to come from that parenting. And that's why I just was curious. It seems like you obviously had very good parenting, because the way you present yourself, you have a high moral compass. That's a known thing in the cue making industry and pool and billiards, which is not always common. So you must have had a really strong upbringing that way.
Yeah, we are a product of our upbringings, and I think my mom was obviously a big influence. She's still with us too. Mm-hmm. She lives there, right? Very close to us, to me and Jan in Ventura. She was an artist too.
Okay.
That definitely, and my dad was too, but in his way. I mean, he was, did masonry and brickwork and in a very artistic way, and that was.
Well, carpentry is an expression of an artistic
he wasn't
ability.
He wasn't much of a carpenter. Mm-hmm. He really worked in concrete and masonry and that kind of stuff.
It's a hard thing when you first get into it. I have friends that do concrete and masonry. They say, like, in the beginning, it's brutal too. I mean, you really get tough doing that kind of job too. It's a physically taxing job.
It's a young man's job. But you know what is one thing that you wouldn't think of so easily is I grew up in the construction business, so it was feast to famine. Mm-hmm. You didn't know whether the saying is you didn't know whether you were going to have chicken or you were going to have feathers. Mm-hmm. So. My mom or dad never really had a straight job. They never had to get up in the morning and go to work, 9-to-5 job where the paycheck comes in every 2 weeks. So that's really hard for a lot of people.
That's where you got that from, though, right?
Yeah,
because I remember, and I quote what you said, and I listened to a lot of what you've said, and I quote it back to you because you're interesting and I like you. But I remember, I think about 3 years ago, you were giving an ACA speech at the Super Billiards Expo, mm-hmm. and you said something like, we're just a bunch of people that are unemployable. And I was like, wow, cool. As an aspiring entrepreneur and now a full-time entrepreneur, I was like, you know what? I'm not the only one, right? Some of us, don't want to, don't desire to, or are not as comfortable working for other people. So your parents essentially were self-employed your whole life?
Yeah. Okay. That's a big hurdle for a lot of people. So I just grew up like that. Yeah. Like sometimes you have money and sometimes you don't, but the next gig's coming along.
Yeah.
And it's just going to work out. A lot of people can't handle that. It's a different kind of pressure. That was just easy for me. That's what I grew up with. So the transition of going from the construction business that I was in into making cues and just laying it out all on the line there and just going for it and expecting that it's going to be bringing money and you're going to be able to pull it off.
So let me ask you this.
It's a gamble. Just used to it.
Yeah. You are definitely a perfectionist with your work. And we've talked about that at some of the stuff that I've seen and what I've played with and whatnot. Was your father and mother very, very high standard when it came to the quality of their work? Did you pick up that character trait from them as well, or did you develop that on your own?
My dad was very proud of the work he did.
Okay.
Here's another thing that I would add is my dad was an artist. He in his work, he was very proud of what he did, but he was not a good businessman. He wasn't good at selling the job, He wasn't good at managing the financial end of things. He was much better at producing a really good product. So that's something. Even when I was 15 years old and going with him, watching him doing estimates, going to do estimates for people's homes or big retaining wall they were going to put it or something, I would just kind of look back and just go, he's just not selling it. He just doesn't.
There's a big difference, though, isn't it?
There's a big difference.
But you know what, though? There's a lot of cue makers that are great craftsmen. They make a great product, but they choose not to sell their products because they know their own strengths, though, or they don't have the time, right? I mean, think about it. People.
A lot of cue makers are horrible business people.
Right, and so and the thing I found is some doctors, or the majority of doctors, believe it or not, they say that they don't pay their bills well because they're always wanting to take care of their patients. So being a great craftsman or being a great artist and craftsman doesn't always go hand in hand with being a great business person. As far as that goes.
Or musician. There's so many similarities between musicians and pool players.
Yeah. So that brings me to my next question in one moment, but I got to ask you one more thing before we move forward. Okay. Give me 2 or 3 things, key things that your father or your mother inputted into your life that you would pass on to the next generation.
Honesty.
Okay, honesty.
Definitely would be one. I think when I put into the honesty, that means doing what you say you're going to do.
Being a person of your word.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and was another one that my mom instilled was finishing. Be a finisher. She says you don't want to be one, like when I'm trying to graduate from high school, and I had I had other interests and stuff, and I was terrible in school, and and she would tell me you just have to graduate high school. Not that you're ever going to use, this is going to be something you're going to use or it has anything to do with the rest of your life, but you have to be a finisher. You don't want to be one of those people that just doesn't finish things.
Can you get all the rest of the cue makers to take that lesson from your dad and
Yeah.
your mom? No, I'm kidding. Because hear me out. They have what they call regular time, and then we have what they call cue maker time, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that gets back to doing what you say you're going to do.
Okay, so honesty, being a person of your word, right?
Yeah.
Because you can be honest, just not, lie to people, don't deceive people, but not fulfill the things that you say that you're going to do.
Yeah,
right?
but I grew up in a very a religious family too. When I was probably 10 or 11 years old, Mormon missionaries knocking on the door of our house, and my mom opened the door, and actually she had some kind of just a whole nother topic, but she had some kind of a really spiritual dream the night before, and here these kids come knocking on the door, and she really felt like that answered it, and she ended up joining the church, and I was active in the church, and I served a mission when I was 19 years old in
Where'd you go?
South Carolina.
Super cool.
I went to a foreign mission.
Okay.
Yeah, South Carolina. And so I grew up in that. So the church influenced me was very big.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in youth programs in the church, and those were people that were very influential in my life. So all of that stuff plays into the character of who you are too.
So you taught you to have good character. You had faith in your life.
I grew up. Grew up. Never smoked. I've never smoked a cigarette. I've never drank. I've never done any.
Yeah.
I was able to dodge all of those potholes, and that was from my church upbringing.
I bet your father and your mother at one point probably got to the point where after all the success that you've had all over the world with your products that you've created and your art, I bet they probably were real proud or are real proud of you for what you've accomplished.
Yeah, although they don't know much about it.
Yeah.
I mean,
is the same thing
they've
with
never
our
seen
family.
me hit a pool ball.
Right. Right.
They've really, I don't know that they've ever really held one of my cues in their hand.
Yeah.
How weird is that?
But they know that you've been able to make a well above average lifestyle. You've been able to support your family, and you didn't have to go work for other people. You've been able to continue to be unemployable, as you say, right? Yeah. And essentially, you've been able to enjoy freedoms that most people will never experience in their life.
Yeah.
So I got to ask you this, okay? What came first, music, magic, or pool?
Let me backtrack, or let me put an addendum on that too. My parents are obviously very proud of me because of the life that I've managed to carve out, which is just so strange.
And it's been an easy path being a cue maker, right? You always make a lot of money. You never had any stress, right?
Been a breeze. But my sister, the same thing.
Yeah.
Me and her grew up. She's a year and a half older than me. Her story is amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, she got out. Well, she went to school and decided to be a screenwriter because she'd always been very creative and a wordsmith, and she probably has one of the most amazing careers as a screenwriter ever. By the time, she was probably 25 or 26, she was the highest paid female screenwriter ever. Probably still is.
In Hollywood?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. This is probably the most amazing statistic. This is unheard of. She's written probably 10 scripts, and she sold every one of them.
Come on. Wow.
That most writers have 20 scripts on the shelf, and they sell one.
She sells every single
sold
one.
Every one of them.
Wow. So what are some things that you've learned from having a sister that's successful? Because I also, I was raised by a single mother myself, and I was raised in a house full of strong women. So I had two older sisters, and, they taught me a lot of things. What were some of the things that you learned from your sister?
Well, both of us just carved our own way.
Yeah.
Just went with our interests and just believed in ourselves and carved our own way. And she hasn't been in the movie industry in probably at least 20 years.
Does she still write now and sell stuff off, or no?
No. she'd been working on a novel for many years, but I think just kind of for her own.
But at one
thing.
time, her stuff was as hot as you can get.
Yeah, but at this also, she looked at that industry, and at one point she just said, I'm out. This is by far the biggest collection of liars and cheaters and thieves you will ever meet.
Did she come up in the church too then?
No, she actually wasn't.
Okay.
She wasn't active.
I was gonna say that's
church.
the polar opposite of the stuff that you grew up around, right?
Yeah, but she just walked away from it and took her money and invested it all in real estate. And she's owned apartment buildings and manages those and buys houses and fixes them up and rents them.
She's done super well.
Yeah,
for herself.
she does very well, and she still leads a very creative life. But the business end of it was just such a disaster. She wanted out.
Now, I heard you worked with her on some stuff before, or you've done some stuff in Hollywood through your connection with her.
Yeah, because this is how Kathy was.
Here comes the good stuff, guys. Okay.
Totally unimpressed with Hollywood at all.
Yeah.
Didn't want to take meetings, right? So she was working on a project with Spielberg, and he would she'd have to come in like once a week and do these meetings, and she just hated doing it. She just wanted to stay home and write, and in her pajamas, and she didn't want to go to these meetings. So she would go to these meetings and record them on cassette, and then take them back and bring them to me and say, "Well, look through this and tell me what he's wanting me to do. I don't understand what." Yeah. So this is a great story. You'll listen to this. So on cassette, I'm listening to these. So this is probably this got to be the early 90s. Steven Spielberg starts pitching to her this idea that he's got for a movie that is actually a true story, and he goes through this whole story about these slaves that are brought over on this ship, and they end up rebelling and taking the ship over, and then the ship ends up getting captured, and they are put on trial, and this whole thing. He pitches the whole movie of
Steven Spielberg.
Steven Spielberg is pitching the movie of Amistad to my sister, and he's saying, "Would you like to do this? Be something you'd like to write?" She says, "No, I'm just not really interested. I just kind of want to do my own thing."
Who says no to him,
so
right?
back to I'm listening to this tape, and here's Spielberg pitching the whole thing to her, and she just literally just said, "No, I'm not interested in that kind of thing. I just want to do my own thing," and just went back to the meeting and whatever they were trying to resolve.
Wait, and that's totally. Hey, that sounds like somebody else I know, though. Well, I'm not interested. I want to do my own thing.
Yeah.
When it comes to making a custom cue or a boutique cue
Yeah.
by Jerry McWorter, you're going to do your own thing because your thing works well.
Yeah.
Okay. That's something you picked up from her, right?
Yeah. That's how she was. But just to tie that up, not that this is, I don't know how much content this is interesting to people, but to tie that end of it up, the only movie that she sold all of these scripts. She sold this one script she was working on for $1.5 million to Spielberg. It was, but they were all original ideas. So the only thing that was made was a movie called The War that Kevin Costner was in. And to her, this was the tipping point of the whole thing. A Hollywood studio head, is about the most unstable job you can have, because you're now in charge of all of these projects, and they come out, and if they bomb, it's your fault because you suck and you're out. And every project that you were involved in, those must suck too, so they're all out. And now there's a new studio head in there. That's how it works. That's how the industry works completely. So she got caught in that trap a number of different times where she had, sold a script and she's excited about it and thinks things are going to get made. Other movies bomb. Now everything that producer was involved in is just shelved. But they own your stuff. So they bought it and they own it. So she's been paid off and no longer has any say. So she felt like I did all this work, and I wanted to create these things, and I wanted to see things happen, and they just, through just the slime of the industry, things just don't get made. And she just was frustrated with, I'm just tired of writing stuff I get paid good money for it, and they get sit on the shelf, or you got to deal with directors that just want to butcher your stuff, and I'm out. So you just took the money and run, and invested it and done very well.
Say if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything, right?
Anything,
so that's huge that she was able to do that, and it's also very liberating when you're talented enough and you've done well enough for yourself where you don't have to do things anymore. You do what you want, you do what you desire, and I said that in a joking way, but I do admire that about you, that you don't just make anything that people want you to make because you don't want to jeopardize the integrity of your brand and the craftsmanship. And people know when they get a McWorter, the consistency of the hit is there, the quality of the craftsmanship is there. But I gotta know though.
I'm just lucky they like what I like.
That's right. What came first though? The music, the magic, or the pool?
The magic. I'm reluctant to talk about the magic stuff. I know that was on my website, and I'm working on my website now, and it's not going to be on the next version of it. Because every kid grows up doing magic tricks, and it's kind of funny because I have these isolated worlds. The music people don't really know about my pool cue business, my music world. Unfortunately, Facebook is kind of merging them together, and they start getting knocked together, but I prefer it that way. The music people don't know anything about the pool, and the pool people really don't know anything about the music, and I like it that way. Part of the reason is because if you tell people you make pool cues or you play pool or something like that, what are they going to tell you?
Yeah.
My uncle earned his way through college playing pool. He was a great pool player, and then they want to tell you these stories that we know in our world are just nonsense. Your uncle could not play a lick. He never won any money. It's just the reality of it is when we know the world that we're talking about to the depth that we know, and the rest nobody else understands.
Right.
So if they don't really speak the language that we speak in this world, it's just, we have to be polite and listen to their stories. That's the same thing with the magic thing. People think, well, every kid grows up doing magic. Well,
this is a totally different level.
It's a different world.
So how old were you when you were exposed to magic?
I was first exposed to magic when I was probably 12 or 13 years old.
Okay.
Learning card tricks and different things like that.
How'd that happen?
Well, actually, we had a back house on our property, and we rented the back house to Mormon missionaries. And one of the Mormon missionaries knew a couple card tricks.
Okay.
And so he showed them to me, and I thought it was really cool, and he wouldn't tell me how he did it. And he said, you just have to figure it out. And so I sat and worked at it and kind of developed my own way to do it that worked, that fooled him.
But it's kind of like magic, in a way. It's kind of like pool, where you get bitten by a little bit of a bug. And you start going down the rabbit hole, and it goes so deep, right?
Yeah, you get bitten by the bug. So that was probably my first exposure to it.
About 12 years old.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then I would go to the magic store and buy, magic tricks like everyone. And I had another friend at school that was interested in it, and we would take the bus to Hollywood Magic, which was, 45 minutes away, and 3 buses, on Hollywood Boulevard, and we'd save our money and we'd buy different tricks and stuff. Then I wandered into a little magic shop that opened just a few miles from my house, and I met one of the most pivotal people in my life, who I'm still very dear friends with. His name was Eric Nolan, and he was 19 years old, I think. But he was a working professional magician. Now, he worked in the day, and having the day job and those things. But he was at night, and he had working in restaurants. He was a close-up magician doing cards and coins and that stuff, and he was just a really entertaining guy. So that's when the world started opening up to me. When I met him, he turned me on to the right books.
Oh.
He turned me on to the right stuff, the guys that are writing the real work, as they would call it. So I started, going through these books and learning, which is all, I'm talking about close-up, sleight of hand type of stuff. So but mainly, he taught me how to perform, He taught me how to look people in the eye, how to be confident, how to tell a story, how to sell what you're doing, and, just taught me how to perform.
So that's where the beginning or the foundation in performance came into your life, because I know, every single year at the Super Billiards Expo, you're the first person they want to hand the microphone to at the International Cue Collectors Show, because they know that you're used to being in front of people, and they know that people enjoy what you're saying, and you know how to capture an audience. So that began with the magic.
That came from Eric Nolan.
Right on.
Yeah.
Right on.
So in Hollywood is the Magic Castle, which is
I was going to ask you, have you been in it?
I was a member. It's a world-renowned, facility, the Magic Castle. So by the time I was 15, I had been, perfecting the art, I guess, but I'd been gigging and been performing enough. And Eric had a job at a restaurant and was the resident magician, which means that he had sat at a front table, and it was a busy restaurant, so when people come in and they'd be waiting for a table or something, there would be a magician there that'd be sitting doing close-up magic and
Awesome.
entertaining them.
Yeah.
Or then they would walk around to the tables and do, when meals were late or whatever, that they'd go over and do 5 or 10 minutes at the table. So it was a really cool niche thing.
So was Eric somewhat of a mentor to you in the magic? Besides giving you the books, did he kind of take you under his wing?
Oh, totally.
Did he physically like teach any tricks? Because it's it's passed down, right?
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
He totally taught me the handling, and he taught me the sleight of hand stuff. But mainly, he got me in the direction of what the real work was. Like, let's equate this to pool.
Okay.
Getting involved in pool, and you're playing in a bar, and you're playing in bar leagues, and this guy's a really good player, and you're hanging around that, or walking into a pool room and you're playing next to Earl Strickland and
Shane
Buddy Hall and
Bamboning,
Shane,
right, something like
yeah,
that.
and you're playing you're involved in the real stuff. He was involved in the real world.
That was like I was telling the guy, on the phone last night, the customer, I'm like, if you haven't been to the Derby, right? I'm like, just go. Put that on. Because you've been to pool tournaments, you've been to league night, but you need to go where the best on the planet are all gathered in one place, in one room. Isn't there like a nostalgia to it? I mean, I got a chill thinking about it.
Oh, yeah.
It's just so cool, the whole vibe, right? Because you don't see that level
It's the
of play.
real culture. It's the real world of that. It's the real of that world, I should say.
So let me ask you this: you said around 12 was the first exposure to it, and then at what point did you meet that dude? You were like,
I was
how old?
14.
So you're like 14. He's 19.
He's 19, and then by the time I was 15, I'd been kind of working with him. I mean, working with him, meaning going to the magic shop and hanging out every day.
That's in L.A.
It was in where I lived in La Crescenta, little town
cool.
Montrose. Montrose was a little, 3 miles down the road. But I was there every day, after school through the summer. I was there from when they opened 9 in the morning till 6 at night, every day, sitting on the floor, practicing something, reading the books that they had for sale and not buying them, watching him working with customers, watching him demonstrate, just watching him just perform.
Now, let me ask you this. Similar to pool, where like nowadays especially, you see a lot of the top players that are maybe not competing or maybe not winning as much, or they're getting a little bit older, they give lessons or they do clinics. Were the magicians willing to teach the next generation like that, the way that pool players are?
Yeah, they share. Yeah, they would share a lot of stuff. But once you're in that real world, once you're among, it's like you go to a tournament and you watch the top players. They'll be sitting at a table and showing each other shots, or showing, have you seen this or have you seen that, or they're showing each other things, just because it's the little love. They're interested in it. Isn't this cool? This guy did this. What should I have done here? So
needless to say, you must have been around some sick, like up close magicians with the card tricks, the sleight of hand. Like you've seen some crazy stuff.
So I was around. He was the connection. Yeah. Now he was a member of the Magic Castle. He was 19, but they had a junior membership, right, for people, because you had to be 21 to get into the Magic Castle, because it was a nightclub at night and alcohol and all that. But they had the junior society, right? Lance Burton was in our group, was one of the younger people at that time.
Wow.
So, and there are other, names that, so there was probably 50 of these kids, that were around the LA area, and then all the people came from all over, and they'd have these like meetings once a month, and they would bring in all these big professional people that would do lectures and teach, the kids, and it was just a society. So he was involved in that, and you had to audition in order to become a member, right? So by the time I was 15, he got a better restaurant gig, and he turned over the restaurant was called Mother's. It was a place in Panorama City, and he turned over that gig to me. So I was 15 years old. I looked older. I acted older, and wearing a suit suit and tie, and doing the magician thing. And I remember, because my mom had to drive me to the gig and drop me off and come pick me up at night, because I wasn't old enough to drive yet. But I was 15 doing that gig and killing it. So I was a working paid magician by the time I was like 15 years old.
15 years old.
Yeah. Then I auditioned. I auditioned for the Magic Castle, and was accepted, and then was just kind of in that world. Then I was working in the Magic Castle on Sundays, which is when you were under 21, you couldn't get in at night, but they had Sunday, they had matinee shows and stuff. So I was working the Magic Castle, worked all the, those rooms of the Magic Castle many times.
So at that point, when you're a teenager,
yeah,
and you were good enough at your craft and what you'd learned and what you've been exposed to and what was being poured into you and what you were, gathering through the reading and through the hanging out at the castle, you were able to make a living already at that, or make money.
Yeah.
Was your goal at that point in your life to be a professional magician?
Yes, I think so. As a matter of fact, you know what? My mom said to me something one time that really kind of upset me. And she said, I was talking about doing magic and I want to do this and do that, whatever my goals were. And she said, "Yeah, that's great." He says, but you're just as likely to change your mind and do something else. And I was like offended, like, this is my life. This is what I'm pouring.
You're happy. You were
I
like
was
passionate.
Successful. I was,
Were you performing with your family all over the
No,
place?
no.
So you kept that to yourself. Yeah.
They didn't care.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they might have seen me work once or twice. I think they came to the restaurant, and of course they were the ones that would just stand in the back, and nobody would know they were parents or whatever. And
but besides, like, what
the point is, when she told me that, I was offended. Like, this is what my where my heart is really at. But she already knew me by that time, that I was going to be involved in many different things, and I was going to be passionate about different things, which is great. It's not a bad thing. It didn't diminish it. I think I took it as a kid, like, that's kids stuff, and one day you'll grow up.
Do you feel
she didn't mean it that way?
Yeah, I get
She
it.
meant you have passion about things, and you'll probably have passion about other things that are also very worthy and valuable.
Do you feel like at that point you showed great promise in the magic community to the people that were around you? Like, were you a naturally good magician, or was it something that you just worked your butt off at and you got good through your practicing?
I worked my butt off at it. It's not work. It's like saying, did you work hard at playing pool? Yeah, I played 8 or 10 hours a day. Every day is because they wouldn't let me play 12 hours a day.
If you do what you love, you never got to go to work.
So I remember as a kid, sitting in my room. I had my table set up, and I'm practicing doing magic stuff and that. And I remember sitting at that table from 6 o'clock at night till 2 in the morning. And my mom saying, "Jerry, you got to go to school tomorrow." And I know, but I loved it. I was into it.
Yeah.
And actually, growing up, I even told that to my son Ryan. I said, I would rather you be the kid that can't put the guitar down and at 2 in the morning is just so involved in what he's doing, rather than the kid that's playing video games and bouncing around and smoking dope with his friends in no direction.
Yeah.
That passion that's just directed at something, like so many pool players, kids that just get that bug and they're just honed in on it. That's a powerful thing, because you can switch that energy to other things, and you learn the skills of making something work, or developing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tackling something that's hard.
So how much longer did you continue down that rabbit hole, since you've been gracious enough to share with us? You started at 12 years old, 15, you're making money at it, you're performing. Yeah. How far down the rabbit hole did you go?
I was working as a working magician probably till 15, 16, 17, 18, graduated high school. I was still gigging, every week. Had gig Friday, Saturday nights doing magic. Restaurant gigs. But this is when then the mother's gig, Eric handed it down to me. I did that for maybe a year, probably close, maybe 2 years. And then I found another gig, and I handed that off to a magician by the name of Daryl Martinez, who was 10 years older than me at least, and already an established name. One of the legendary close-up magicians.
What was his name?
Daryl Martinez.
And he was from L.A.?
He was from that L.A. area.
Wow.
But he had written books. These books that I'm reading, he was already a very well-known, established, top-level pro. Here I am, this kid, turning a gig over to him.
That's pretty strong.
Yeah.
So I got to ask you this now. Okay, so, and I know obviously there's certain things that you can't divulge. There's different oaths that you take and so on, and to protect the secrets, right? Like, I remember they came out with that show, which all the magicians hated, the Masked Magician, and
right.
He was giving away the tricks and so on. But in regard to the castle or the library that everybody knows that they have.
The library, you know about that.
Right. So is there a certain level that you have? Like, in other words, Are there different levels, like you mentioned, like junior magician? Then you have like, is there like master level? Do they restrict you to a certain degree, or is everything accessible to everybody?
The library is accessible to everybody, and the library, it's just a cool environment. And, it's got a million books up there, but most of the library is a lot of stuff that was written probably in the 20s, 30s, all that is not is not apropos to what was happening.
Just like
at the
building
time.
pool cues, you guys have evolved. And that's just something else I'm
Yeah.
going to ask you later, because you were kind of a monumental part in your career. You were able to be a part of a shift in the way cues are made in pool and with the artistic.
Absolutely.
But just one last thing on the magic though. So it was accessible, all the information, as much as you wanted to.
It was all there. There was really good stuff there, but you know what? 90% of the people that were up there couldn't do it anyways.
Gotcha.
They didn't have the skills. It's like trying to get professional instruction from a top level player. Mm-hmm. If you don't have the skills to do it, it's not going to help you.
Right.
So
what shifted to where you're down this path? You're learning. You're gaining knowledge. You're getting gigs. You're giving gigs. You're being recognized, obviously, for your ability.
Yeah.
You're able to earn money at it, right? What shifted or what changed at that point in your life?
Well, the biggest, I guess, transition, or let me say element in that world was the magicians that were able to be entertaining and the ones that weren't. There was a lot of great technical magicians that had skills like unbelievable, had unbelievable technique and skills, and things were perfect, and they were boring as an old coat of paint. They just were not entertaining, right? So they were technicians, and they would write books, and they would, develop these great ideas, but they weren't entertaining.
Some of them actually, correct me if I'm wrong, but they invent their own tricks, their own.
Oh yeah. No, most
that, right?
Yeah, most of them do. Now, also, you got to understand that I was all involved in the close-up magic world, cards, coins, those kind of close-up things, small 50-person audiences, small theater stuff on big stages. I don't even know what it's about.
The David Copperfield.
Stuff, right? It's not interesting to me.
Have you met him, by the way?
No. I'm not interested in that world. It doesn't even find it entertaining. It's
David
not my
Blaine,
world.
though, because he's pretty phenomenal with the up close stuff, right? No.
No.
Not in your circle, right? Got it. Okay.
Wasn't my interest.
Right on.
There, who was probably my favorite dude, which you could find on YouTube, is a guy by the name of Albert Goshman, who was this fat Jewish guy from New York, and he developed an act that he did really pretty much the same act for 30 years, but he was doing
worked.
It was brilliant, and he did it from the 50s. And when I had met him and known him, that was in the 80s. So he was already an older guy, but he still performed, and it was just beautiful. And he just had these droopy eyes, and he was just this kind of boring New York Jew character.
But he could really perform, huh?
But it was so charming.
Wow.
It was the tempo of it and everything. It was just so unique and such a character.
Was this sleight of hand phenomenon?
Yeah, it was great. And he developed this act, and he was just such a character. He was so entertaining, and had I don't know. It's hard to explain. You got to watch him. But this is in the inside world. It's like people saying the name of Don Willis, who was a famous road player.
Yep. Somebody outside of pool
nobody
wouldn't
know who that is at all.
Right. But
So-
what was the kind of
Okay, so
defining-
what I was talking about is the turning point, or understanding the entertainment end of it, is being able to be engaging and talk to people and just be, interesting. That's really probably the biggest word of any of them, just being
Yeah.
interesting. So I did the magic for a while, and then till I was probably 19, although I was already playing pool by that time. So there was times I was doing a magic gig on Friday or Saturday nights. So I'd pack up and head straight to the pool room.
So this is 19 years old, and this is where you started playing pool.
I started playing pool at about 16.